Welcome to Interplay, Conversations in Music. I'm Michael Shapiro, your host, and today I'm with a dear friend, composer extraordinaire, Daron Hagen. Hi, Daron.
Hello, my friend.
So good to see you. And this business that we're going through, this monstrous business that the world is going through, has kept us apart. But I saw you right before it hit, it turns out, I think.
We had a lovely lunch the
We
last
did.
time.
I came up to your neck of the woods and we had a great time. Well, looking forward to it again. Daron, the thing that got me started with really thinking about you was reading your autobiography, frankly. I knew of you. I knew about the operas somewhat. I knew about the huge number of works you've written. But I didn't know a lot about you until I read Duet with the Past, which is your autobiography, which I must say is a no-holds-barred autobiography. It's not like Richard Wagner's My Life, which is basically, a screed, S-C-R-E-E-D.
Yeah.
You let everything hang out, didn't you?
Well, I got a great bit of advice from a writer named Lynn Fried many years ago, who I knew I was writing a memoir, and she said, "Well, darling, if you're going to do it, be brave or don't." So I found my courage, and I wrote a book that took courage, for me at least, to write. I've always felt that why would we take up people's time? If you write a 3-minute piece of music, that means you've taken 3 minutes of somebody's life they've given you. I still find that to be extraordinary generosity on the part of music lovers. And readers, the same thing. At least with a reader, they can put your book down and you never found out that they put the book down, and they've been using it as a coaster ever since. They only got through 5 pages. But with a piece of music, they're trapped in a concert hall.
Aren't they?
The other thing is that I read somewhere, and I forget where it was because I don't know, lack of sleep, but a fellow who wrote a memoir that was to console the troubled and to trouble the comfortable, to comfort the troubled and trouble the comfortable.
Sounds right.
And I thought that was a really neat challenge and an important challenge for somebody who is trying to be a better person.
Now, I'm curious of one thing. Isn't that what we do in music?
Absolutely. If we're artists, there's so much of us that has to deal with the marketplace and what constitutes commercialism. And, we take for granted, or maybe we don't, that we're artists. We aspire to be artists. But what does being an artist mean? Does being a fine artist means financially not viable or non-commercially viable, or nobody likes it, so it must be art? These are all things that we're thinking about all the time.
Well, you and I share the fact that we have families, that we have kids, that we have houses, that we have mortgages. Does any of that filter into the way you write?
No, I wish it had. I always, since being a teenager, realized that one had to solve the money problem somehow. And how one solves the money problem is dictated on one's own value system. What you can tolerate, how we spend our time, and for me, I was always able to tolerate a large amount of financial instability. Beyond instability, complete madness. And of course, you just framed it. You have kids, you have a mortgage, and things like that, and you suddenly have to grow up and become a stable provider. I was very lucky to have children late, after I had already figured it out, figured the money thing out for myself. But yeah, we live in a capitalist society. And if you want to make art, you have to buy the time to do it, or you have to have other people buy the time for you.
I have to say a funny story. When I was studying with Elie Siegmeister in the 60s, he was asked to go to the Soviet Union to have, this American composer goes to the Russia exchange thing. And when he got there, he was taken to the musicians building in Moscow. It was a high-rise Soviet block structure, and he was shown by his assistant, whoever was taking him, oh, that's where all the musicians live. That's where all the artists live, painters. That's where all the poets live. Oh, and the chess people are over there. So he told me, can you imagine? Shostakovich was in the musicians building, as was Gilels and Oistrakh and Rostropovich and Kogan and all the rest. So you can imagine, you can make a joke out of this. Shostakovich goes in the elevator.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there are two corollaries to that. It's the when you get a cab story.
Right.
When I was in my 20s, I would grab a cab in Philadelphia, and you talk to the cab driver the way that you do, and the fellow would ultimately say, "What do you do?" And I say, "I'm a composer." He says, "Oh, that's nice. What do you do for a living?"
Yeah, I know. That's
Yeah.
the old joke. My dad used to say feast or famine, but let's get off this this discussion, and talk about your art, because it's wonderful. I once had a conversation with Cho En Chung, who was referring to another composer. And he says he's a very melodic composer, and that was on the subway, where I then proceeded to stand back and say, "Yes, sir. Yes, sir."
Indeed.
I mean,
Well,
indeed, for God's sake, why not? It's like, oh, he's a living composer. Does he eat? Does he or she breathe? Daron, you're all about communication. You have been from the get-go, and you always will be. There is no, I mean, you're an incredibly talented guy in every way, shape, or form. And we'll go to the every way, shape, or form soon. I've already talked about your writing. The memoir is extraordinarily written. It has musical phrases in the words, great melodic line and harmony in the words, and all the things that are in your music is in your memoir, which is completely open, and it's true of your art. Now
well,
you have,
nice of you
don't you
to say.
think?
Well, it's kind of you to say. I mean, I think that uh, the more I get out of my own sandbox and think that I have a sandbox, the more fulfilled I am as a person who wanted to live an examined life. Um, do you remember how Schoenberg used to just jump on Bernstein for, if only he wouldn't play the piano, he'd be a better conductor. If he wouldn't conduct, he'd be a better composer. And nobody would give him a
I'm sorry,
break.
Kusevitsky? You say
No,
Kusevitsky?
not
Oh,
no,
Harold Schoenberg.
Harold
Oh,
Schoenberg.
oh, of
Yeah.
course. Yes,
Remember
yes,
him?
yes.
And I remember as a kid
That
reading
was
those
horrible
reviews,
for Lenny.
just thinking, yeah, just leave him alone, let him
Leave him
be.
alone.
And I think that our society still, less so, I think, but still wants to pigeonhole people. And I remember with Ned Rorem, when I was studying with him, it was always his writer friends would say, they knew nothing about his music. His musician friends would know nothing about his writing. And I'm afraid that I still have a lot of people who are the same way with me, but now I've got filmmaker friends who don't know anything about music and so forth. I think that I'm happiest just going my own way, doing my own thing, and eschewing all gatekeepers and all received ideas of what constitutes success, artistic or professionally.
Right. You're just doing it. Now, let's talk about Orson Rehearsed, which is a film
It is.
created by you in every which way.
Yeah.
Describe every which way to me and to our viewers.
Well, it's about Orson Welles. And Orson Welles grew up in Kenosha. Well, he was born in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and grew up all over the world. But he's a Wisconsin boy, as am I, and has been someone who's fascinated me all my life as who was a polymath, actor, writer, beautiful visual artist, filmmaker, director. I mean, we all know that Orson Welles did a lot of things, and a very, very intensely socially conscious and a politically active person. You used to write speeches for FDR, and he would coach FDR on how to deliver speeches. He took a year off of his own career to campaign for Roosevelt, and so forth. Anyway, I have long had a fascination for the bardo, or the area between life and death, where some people call it limbo, or what is the transition, the liminal zone between these states, where Charon, the river Styx, people crossing from one state to the other, Orpheus and Eurydice. And so I got it in my mind that I would examine how Orson Welles might be feeling during the last few heartbeats of his life. A man famously started at the top and worked his way down in many ways, but was always on the outside, always a free spirit, always someone seeking a fulfilling personal and artistic existence. So for me, it was just natural that if you're going to create a lyric theater work about a man who was a filmmaker, you should use film. And so I started shooting film just to get limber in my own head with how that person might think. And I've always been a pretty serious critical film watcher since my teens. So I was already aware of the language and the rhetoric. And so I started shooting film, and I had about 60 hours of high def video. And then I realized, well, this has got to be integration of film, the way that Welles very early on integrated film into his legit stage plays. Then I realized, well, the technology is now so inexpensive and so fluid and fluent that with some application, I could learn these apps, and and I'd been doing some film work and so forth. Anyway, I had the skills. And so I started cutting together film. And then I realized I needed to create a process. So I wrote an opera about moments in Welles' life that then would be accompanied by films, singers singing to films, 3 singers portraying Welles that would be singing his internal thoughts as avatars, a young Welles, a dying Welles, and a middle-aged Welles. And the films would be showing us what they were thinking. And the orchestra would be an orchestra, but there would also be a huge electroacoustic track that would sometimes be louder or without the live players, so that you'd always have 2 opposing forces, or 3, or many. There would be live music, but there'd also be dead music. There'd be live action, but also dead canned action on the screens. But once I got to that place, then I started thinking the way that Joyce thought about writing, or Paul Muldoon, or Seamus Heaney thinks about poetry, which is how many layers can you add in and still be comprehensible. So I realized it would have to be a film ultimately. So the films were made, the onstage films were made. The show was written to match those films with live singers. The live singers were done in concert with a live orchestra of 11 players, Fifth House Ensemble in Chicago. And I staged it with the films going and the opera singers singing. And those were shot by 3 cameras and mobile camera. And everything would then I cut everything together, but then there would be a 3rd level of rhetoric, which would be semi-opaque images that would be drawn from both worlds, that would then have their own sort of Ghosts of Versailles story that floated on between the 2. Anyway, it's a little bit crazy, but
well, I've seen the film. It hangs together, and it's very much your voice, and it's very compelling. You can tell the different ages of the people. Obviously, they're physically different. With the elderly gentleman who passed away very soon.
We know Bob. Both of us know Bob. Yeah, Bob Orth. It was a great privilege to work with Bob, because Bob was going through chemotherapy during production.
It's an extraordinary performance.
It is. He was playing a dying Orson Welles, and he himself was in the process of coming to grips with the very issues that his character in the opera. And
yeah, extraordinary.
And during Discovery, while I was staging it with the men, these were candid conversations. And to me, there's nothing better. There's no more honorable transaction than what we were doing together, talking about real things and trying to make a work of art about real things.
May I just go off of that and talk to you, having given honor to the great Orth, who was extraordinary. You've been a theater guy, in addition to your concert life and your writing life and everything else you do, your teaching life, your daddy life, your dog life.
You saw her.
I just saw it, yeah. And but theater, you've written a dozen operas, is this right?
Yeah, I've written a lot of them, and every one of them I've attempted a different strategy for getting to solving the dramaturgical riddle. And so some of them are pretty straightforward. Pretty some of them have very litteristic, hard to understand libretti. Some of them have very speechy libretti. Some are like Orson, 90% found objects.
Film, fixed image, always going to be that way, although Orson rehearsed could be done in a theater, quite obviously. But you're somebody who's worked in theater, which is a different show every night, even
Right.
though there's the urtext, as it were, that people are using. Is this where opera's going to go? Into something harder and
Well,
fixed?
I mean, some people would argue that this is where opera's always been. You know, there are so many versions of Verdi operas that anytime Company is revived of some time, it's a different show. Anytime you do legitimate music theater, the show's been altered for that market or that reinterpretation of the show. It doesn't take a Peter Sellars to make Mozart completely different. All you have to do is wear a different pair of intellectual glasses toward the staging of it. Changing the actual musical document is not that big of a deal. You don't make the perfect production of Don Giovanni any more than you make the perfect production of Long Day's Journey into Night. You do the show that the people in the room can do.
I understand that, but
Yeah,
let me. I've been speaking to some opera directors and opera
yeah,
producers and opera administrators now. They're very, very, very occupied with thinking about alternatives.
yeah, and I understand that. I mean, of course, COVID has forced us all to come to grips with with rethinking what constitutes the sandbox. I to to be honest, I mean, I let go of the sandbox a long time ago. I think that theater have always felt guerrilla theater on the sidewalk is just as viable as theater at the Met, and that all spaces, all media, there's nothing particularly novel or innovative or visionary about simply using the tools that we have to go into new places and express things like that. I mean, I did Orson the way that I did because the subject and the execution form must follow function. The subject must be a manifestation. But I agree with you. Yeah, I mean, everybody is
This is, I
opera.
mean, there's so much talk about this. I will say
Yeah,
about Austin Rehearsed, which I hope people will see after it does its
it's yeah,
route through the various festivals and so forth, that it does reach some theaters and also television and YouTube or wherever, Vimeo, wherever you wish to put it, that people do watch it and understand this very new concept of what you do. It's kind of very high art, guerrilla art, and very organic into the character of this man. That being
and
said, if I can just jump in to conclude our talk today, you've been in a lot of different directions,
uh,
but you got a lot of oomph left, Daron. Where do you want to take? That oomph too.
yeah,
Where do you want to take this? What's next?
I don't know. I have no idea. I'm I know I'm shooting an opera called 910 for six singers in an Italian restaurant in Chicago next year. It's sort of my dinner with Andre meets um, uh, oh, what is the Verdi opera with the two men? Oh, I don't know. It could be Rigoletto. But it,
Don Carlo.
Don
That could
Carlo,
be.
that's it, Don Carlo. Oh, Don Carlo. Um,
Dum, ba, 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 bum, ba-da-dum, ba-dum. Oh God, is that
oh
good?
God, yes. It's six people having a dinner in an Italian restaurant the night before 9/11, and they're in
Oh,
Little Italy. They're all going to die the next day,
wow.
and it's going to be shot with a rail camera so that I can get all the shots. And the music will come from it'll all be pre-recorded with soundscapes and stuff, and come from a jukebox in the Italian
Nice,
restaurant.
nice.
And the audiences will pay to have dinner and see the show and
Uh-huh.
basically see the filming at the same time. And the opera itself is cued to the courses of the meal, and the
Wow,
arias come and go as the removes happen,
this is
and that's
great.
the next one.
Well,
Nine
it sounds great. We can't wait to see it. And its name again is 910.
910, yeah.
Well, even though this has been short and sweet, I want to thank you for joining me on Interplay, Daron Hagen. We can't wait to go to the restaurant together in Chicago. Wouldn't that be
Oh,
fun? Chicago has the best restaurants. No offense to New York, but I love Chicago to eat.
the loop will feed us forever.
Oh my God. Darren, be well. This has been
Be well,
wonderful.
my friend. Thanks for having me over.
Thank you,
Bye.
Daron Hagen, for joining me on Interplay Conversations in Music. This is your host, Michael Shapiro.
Take care, Michael. Bye.